Back at it with the Model 1.4. I've been using the Model 1.4 as a resampler along with my DAW. Why? Because it's the best. This mixer is fully analog. I'm using this nice analog drive for pretty much everything that I'm running through it. This whole workflow also helps me a lot with commitment, just like committing to a part. Because with this approach, you're actually printing whatever it is that you're adding through the Model 1.4 into your track in your DAW, into your stems. I do find that emulating an analog feel with plugins is doable, especially when you're just doing it on one track. At that point, it really is pretty much unrecognizable between analog versus plugins. But when you do resample the majority of your tracks through actual analog, it slowly starts to add up, and all these little baby steps make a difference in the quality of the overall track. So what is this thing here on the right? It's the Lyra 8. I actually just did a video on it. Here it is. In this case, I'm using it as an effect send through the Model 1.4. Another thing about this approach having to do with the commitment is that it makes me think differently in a creative way. Especially when it comes to adding effects, I'm more intentional and present with what I'm adding. And it gives me a chance to actually, like in a tactile way, perform these effects into my stems, into my tracks. Because again, everything is printed in, so you're like doing takes. This setup in particular has really enhanced the quality of my tracks, and it's definitely a direction that I'm going to continue exploring. I just don't see myself going back to like a 100% in the box workflow. A huge thank you to today's sponsor, DistroKid. If you're looking to officially distribute your music to major streaming platforms, you know the ones: Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music. Your best option is DistroKid. They're specifically geared towards independent artists and producers. And so they cater to people like me. They offer a bunch of free promotional tools to help promote your music. We're gonna be going through those later in this video. If you're interested in any of this gear and you'd like to support what I do, there's also affiliate links, so purchase links in the description for everything mentioned in this video. There are timestamps in the description if you'd like to jump to anything specific. Let's get the audio routing out of the way first and foremost. Audio is obviously coming from my DAW, is going through my audio interface, the Apogee Ensemble, through D-Sub, whoop, into this cable right here, into the mixer. And when I'm resampling, it's actually going out of the mixer and right back into channels 1 and 2 of my audio interface. So setting that up in my DAW, let's say on this track right here, Full Groove, I'm gonna route that to output 3-4, which is channel 1, 2, because this is a stereo channel. And again, as I mentioned, it goes right back into my audio interface, right back into my DAW. I would have to create an extra track here, which is what I'm gonna do. Extra track, audio 1, 2. So that's how I would record it right back into my DAW. This all happens live. So a very easy audio setup. Let's get to resampling. First things first, we're gonna start with this drum groove. This is actually from a track that I'm currently working on. So here's the groove. I mean, it already sounds pretty great as is. This is with no resampling going on here. This is just the initial groove. Let's enhance it. Give it a bit more volume perhaps. Boost the low end for sure. This is on the master EQ. There we go, lots of low end. Maybe a bit of drive. I don't want to give too much because then that low end is really going to start to distort. Like that. So we're like right on the edge. And if we want, we could boost whatever frequency we want here. Let's give a little sweep. Okay, I'm liking that. So that's the analog EQ, great. What is the next step? I can use this master filter to sort of perform in that drum part, that resampled drum part. So let's do that. I'm gonna cut out a lot of the lows for the intro. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And then when the band comes in, or to the band, the rest of the parts, that's when the low end can come in here. So what I like to do in this instance, especially with drums, is to play through the entire track and then add EQs in there. Maybe if I want to drop out the kick here and there, or add like some sort of low pass section, you could actually perform that in. Which honestly makes this whole process so much more fun. Instead of having to like click in your parts or click in a low pass or high pass, you could just do it through a very high quality mixer and it sounds great. I'm saying a high quality mixer, like it could be any mixer. So I'll give you one more example of this later in the track where there's a bit more of a build. The next thing I'm going to do is whip out the Lyra 8, which happens to have a killer distortion effects right here. So as I mentioned, I'm using it as an external in. I'm able to route these effects to, let's say, channel 1 where the drums are. I could just boop, add a bunch of distortion. So going back to the initial groove that we already resampled right here, I'm just going to change this to output 3, 4, good. This time we're going to completely drop the volume of this already sampled track here. I'm going to raise the distortion, so we're only going to hear the quality from the distortion effects end. Let's hear it. Okay, so that obviously doesn't work for the low end, so I could actually cut some of that out. Okay, so let's say that's a quality that I like. 2, 3, and just record it straight in. Pretty sure I'm going to want to drop the volume of that distorted track, so it's a little bit more in the background. Let's hear this all together. Here comes the full groove. I really like that with the Lyra 8. You could of course add any sort of effects that you'd want through the Model 1.4. So let's get a before and after. Before. After. Okay, cool. So this gives you like a solid idea of how to approach this with drums. Let me give you some ideas on how to do the same thing, but with synths or melodic parts. With the Lyra 8 in particular, it's got an effect called mod delay, which is especially cool and effective for ambient builds going from one section to the next. And so I currently have drums, the 303, as well as synth solo. Let's get levels for the synth part. And mind you, for this particular example, we're actually not going to be hearing the initial synth part because, again, the volume is dropped to 0. Let's hear this. We'll bring this in later afterwards. Here comes the drop. One, two. With the rest of the synth part. I, of course, have mixing control here. I could also even go in and automate specific sections. This is obviously something that every DAW has. Like, for example, for this particular lift, if I wanted to really accentuate it, this is what that would sound like. So that just gives you like a rough idea of this type of workflow. We all know that analog is the king of low end, it's the king of bass. So once again, if you wanted to, you could just boop, boost your bass right here, as well as here with this sculpting EQ. There's a few more reasons and pros why I think this setup is so useful for a producer, especially a producer working from home or from a small studio. But before getting into that, let's talk about today's sponsor, DistroKid. If you are an independent artist or producer, DistroKid is pretty much the #1 choice. First off, there's a discount linked in the description of this video, which I encourage you to use. It's just over $20 a year to release unlimited music to all major streaming platforms. And one of the things that makes it amazing for independent artists is just the sheer amount of free promotional tools that they offer. Personally, my favorite is Hyperfollow, which I like to use as a free link and bio link. It's the cleanest that I could find, and you're able to claim as many pages as you'd like for free. So for example, if you have multiple artist names or possibly landing pages for singles or any other important landing pages, DistroKid's got you with Hyperfollow. They recently released an iOS app so you can access all of your DistroKid information, your statistics, all through your smartphone, which just makes everything that much easier and like on the go. So join the team. There's over 1 million DistroKid users and they distribute 1/3 of the world's music. Let's get into some other reasons or pros why I think this is such a great setup for producers, home producers. We've already mentioned that it forces you to commit because you're printing parts into your tracks. On top of this, it's totally portable. If you're moving around, you could have a very high quality setup at your disposal, fully analog. Using something tactile like a mixer along with your DAW is just such a fun way of producing music. I find that it just makes everything so much more hands-on. You feel like you're actually doing something as opposed to just working, with a MIDI controller or, 100% in the box, perhaps. I'll show you an example of this. I just routed all of my tracks from my DAW to my mixer and I could do like a performance thing. I've looped like an 8-bar section. So right now I have drums, bass, pads, and then synth melodies. Let's say I want to put a low pass on my drums, everything else. I have mod delay routed to each of these channels as well. Right, so now I've got like a cool ambient thing going. Right, so I could do fun little passes like this and sort of perform whatever it is that I'm composing while I'm composing it. For me, at least right now, this hybrid combination is just the best possible combination for fun versus, getting down to business and putting out some music. But this is something that I could already hear in the comments. There's one downfall to the setup, and obviously that is the price. This is quite an expensive setup. If you're going fully analog, you're just gonna pay the price. So the Model 1.4 mixed with the Apogee Ensemble, my laptop, as well as however many effects, hardware effects units that you're using, you're looking at like probably around 10 G's. So that's the reality. Obviously, I didn't start off with this setup. I've been doing music production for about 10 years now. So this is something that I've built up over the years. I have invested a lot into my gear. So don't get discouraged if this is something that's kind of out of your price range. Obviously, there's so many other options that you can go with to emulate this sort of setup, this kind of like hybrid tactile versus software setup with effects. If you do have the resources though, and you're looking to possibly purchase anything mentioned in this video, use the affiliate links. It's a great way of supporting me. It doesn't cost you anything extra. I would just make a small commission from whatever sale. I also have a Patreon where I'm dropping weekly content, so if you guys are interested in that. That's what I have for you guys today. If you have any questions or comments, comment section, and I hope to see you guys very soon.